Alright, the story behind AI, artificial intelligence, which was released in 2001. It's a tumultuous story. I'm going to try to get into it. Okay, so the story goes like this. Kubrick is thumbing through Harper's Bazaar, and he comes upon this story called Super Toys Last All Summer Long by Brian Aldiss. And he falls in love with the story, and he recruits Brian Aldiss to write the screenplay.
It was rather hard to work with Stanley. Did I enjoy it? Well, my wife said to me, "Why are you putting yourself through this?" And my response was, well, I've always wanted to work with a genius.
The thing is, Kubrick is notorious for when you work for him, you don't leave his grasp. Like, he doesn't let you go or even leave the country in the case of Brian Aldiss, because he gets fired in '89 because Brian Aldiss went to Vancouver to go to a science fiction convention, and Kubrick was like, yeah, you can't leave the country, you're done.
He turned to me and said, "Brian, this isn't working." "All right, we're finished," or whatever he said. And he then turned his back on me. I thought that was just plain rude.
Fires Brian Aldiss. Hires Bob Shaw. Bob Shaw comes on. Bob Shaw is basically like more tough, drinks a lot, shows up to Kubrick's estate a few pints in. He basically gets fired after only working for 6 weeks with Stanley. Finally, enter Ian Watson in 1990. Kubrick immediately gives him 2 books. Okay? He gives him Hans Moravec's Mind Children, which is like a complex book about like artificial intelligence written by an MIT professor, Hans Moravec. And then the other one is Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio. Okay, because Kubrick at this point is like obsessed with this being Pinocchio set in the future, the near distant future, post global warming. Like the east coast of the United States is like underwater, and he just wants to set Pinocchio in the future.
He was a voracious reader, novels, short stories, the Kirkus Report, anything.
So Ian Watson comes on the scene, and Ian Watson is like immediately is kept skeptical of him, because Ian Watson at one point is like, yeah, I'm like a Labour Party candidate in England, and Kubrick's like, if the Labour Party gets in, I'm leaving this country. I'm out of here. I'm not going to stay here. So immediately Ian Watson's like, I don't know if we're going to gel well as creatives, but they end up actually writing some of the most of what we now know as AI together in a billiard room in Kubrick's estate. Watson describes the relationship with Kubrick as like turning his brain into like scrambled eggs, because Kubrick would just like ping pong between ideas. He'd be like, what if the teddy bear has a kangaroo pocket? And then he would be like, if the Labourites get into power, do you think they're going to employ like currency control? like just paranoid. So Ian Watson was like, it was mad. It was like working in a madhouse. But Kubrick did like one idea, and Ian Watson's idea was making a sex robot, kind of like the prostitution of these new AI. Kubrick's getting a bit skeptical about Ian Watson too, so then he employs his old collaborator, Arthur C. Clarke, in 1982. You might recognize him from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Arthur C. Clarke writes a treatment, and Kubrick is like, this is terrible. Tear it up immediately. He tells him that because he's like paranoid it might get leaked. Then Kubrick decides to hire on Sarah Maitland. Sarah Maitland is another sci-fi author in England, and he liked Sarah Maitland because she did fairy tales really well. And Kubrick was like, all right, Ian Watson built a 90-page treatment that's like science fiction, you know what I mean? Like hard science. Now we gotta get like the fairy tale, the mythology embedded in it. Sarah Maitland gets hired. Sarah Maitland's like, immediately tells Stanley Kubrick, I've never written a screenplay before. He's like ecstatic. He's like, great, that's fantastic. Because Kubrick didn't like the screenplay structure. He didn't like the form of the screenplay because he's like, people just read dialogue. They don't read the headers. They don't read the descriptions. So he was thrilled that Sarah Maitland had no experience, because he liked working off more of a novelistic kind of structure for his scripts. Sarah Maitland said about Kubrick's intention with AI was he wanted to kind of create a cultural change. He wanted to undo maybe the damage he had done by creating HAL 9000 in 2001, which kind of gave people this kind of like skeptical reticence to accept AI and machines. So he was like, I want to make this so that people kind of like accept AI. And in a way, he wanted it to be, his quote to Sarah was like, if machines are made by us and act like us, are they not our children? Should we not treat them similarly as our children? And Sarah Maitland found that kind of fascinating. It was like, yeah, Kubrick really wanted to make a touching story that humanized our relationship to machines. So essentially he wanted humans to love them, really. And he had issues with Blade Runner by Ridley Scott. He was friends with Ridley Scott, but he told Sarah he didn't like that story because he was like, all right, if the replicants are so similar to us, why would we be spending so many resources to kind of hunt them down? It didn't make sense to him. Kind of a logical gap. And Kubrick was like, let's do the opposite. Let's make them so similar to us that it's hard for us to let go of them. But Sarah Maitland also had issues with Kubrick because, again, he just wouldn't let them go out of their grasps. So Sarah Maitland described one situation. She was like, look, Stanley, I need like a month to just write on my own. I can't be in the room with you all the time. Getting my brain just sponged out. So I need like a month. And Kubrick was like, that's not going to happen. She's like, well, let's negotiate a time when I can work on my own. And he's like, I'll give you 10 days. So Sarah Maitland's like, all right, I'll take it. I mean, what else am I going to say? I'm hired by Stanley Kubrick. And in her own memoir, she's like, I hadn't even gotten home yet. And I checked my phone, and he had left like 3 voicemails with like some of the most intense questions about the script. And she's like, oh, he just can't give me space to work on my own. Kubrick asks Steven Spielberg if he wants to adapt AI.
He sent me something by Brian Aldiss called Super Toys Last All Summer Long.
Right. Did you call it AI, or did he?
No,
he already come up with that?
He began calling it AI, and then he popped the question. And he said, "Would you be interested in directing this?" And I'll be the producer.
Because he never had that relationship with any other filmmaker.
This is the first time. I don't think he's ever asked anybody to do anything like this before.
He's like, look, you direct it, I'll produce it. It'll be Stanley Kubrick presents a film by Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg's like, I don't know, this is kind of like more of your story. I don't know why I would be adapting it. It's not really, in my wheelhouse. And Kubrick's like, no, you'll do a great job. You'll do a great job. Convinces Steven Spielberg to do it. Steven Spielberg has the same experiences as the other writers.
Part of the story that always amuses me is Stanley said, you need to install a fax machine, because I'm going to be sending you a lot of notes and pictures and ideas, and it's got to go in your bedroom. I said, why? He said, because what if somebody comes in and reads I said, who's going to come in and read in the middle of the night? He said, what if a kid comes in or somebody comes in and reads what I've written you? It's got to go in a private place. You have to assure me it's going to go in your bedroom.
Right.
So I put the fax machine in the bedroom. Not
I'm
understanding.
going to use this from now on as a producer.
Oh, I'm telling you. Do you know how loud a fax machine phone is? It is 10 times the volume of a regular house line.
Right.
That thing would go off at 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. It lasted 2 nights.
Yeah.
And Kate Capshaw, my wife, threw the fax machine out of the bedroom.
Then he hires Chris Baker. Same situation where Chris Baker's like, Kubrick just wouldn't let me. I was like in residency with him for years because he just constantly wanted ideas. And when he saw kind of like the woman's mouth as a tunnel for the cars, Kubrick was like, you should win an award because this is such brilliant illustrations. So Chris Baker works for him for like a few years. They create like literally nearly 1,000 storyboards. Chris Baker's like, I don't know what else to do. I can give you all my ideas. You're milking me. After Stanley Kubrick died in 1999, Stanley Kubrick's estate, his wife and his brother-in-law, Jan Harlan, decide to ring up Spielberg and like, hey, look, would you like to maybe carry on his legacy by directing this? So Steven Spielberg talks to Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is like, you got to do it. Like, you have to do this. This is like amazing. Put Minority Report on hold and do this first because this is like your priority. So Steven Spielberg does that. He decides to take all the storyboards, take all the writing that Ian Watson, Brian Aldiss, Sarah Maitland, and Bob Shaw had done with Stanley Kubrick, and then write his own script based on it. So etching in pieces here and there. And that's how AI was made. AI, I think, works as a film. I dug it. Do I think it's got Kubrick's intensity of intellect? No, but I think it's a fantastic film. Let me know what you think about the comments. Let me know if you think Kubrick would have made a better film or if you like Spielberg's adaptation.